Good evening and welcome everybody. I am so excited to introduce to you my fabulous guest, Malka. I am really excited to be bringing this topic to you tonight. Your relationships start with you is a phrase that I took from Malka's bio, and I love that because it's something that I also truly believe in, that when we feel good within ourselves, how we relate to the world around us has a big impact. And of course, in these years of 40 and above, some of you who've registered, I know, are even younger than 40, and I know that you are preparing yourselves very well for this midlife period, which is from 40 and onwards. In this time of life, we have so many questions, and we start to not always feel so comfortable within our bodies. So I am going to have a lot of these conversations with Malka tonight. Last week on our little chat that we had before deciding on exactly what we were going to speak about tonight, she came up with some phenomenal ideas, and I look so forward to her sharing her expertise with us and the tools that she's going to have to offer us. So, Malka, welcome. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
I'm just as excited as you are, I think.
Excellent, right. So we can speak for hours and hours on end. We're going to try and keep it to certain times because I know how busy everybody is, but I think you'll find this of great value. So first of all, I just want to start, Malka, I know that you are a wife, you're a mother, but most importantly, you are an incredible human being. You are a woman. You are a woman who is already in menopause, yes? Okay, you're going to speak a little bit about that for us as well. And in your business life, you are a marriage coach. And I want to get a little bit more into who you are, where you're from, before we really get into the questions tonight. So if you can give a little bit more of a background, how long you've been in Israel for, that's a great start.
So the quick bio of myself, Malka. I'm really excited to meet everybody here tonight. I'm 55. I was 55 this past spring. I was born and raised in New York City. I've been Israeli and thrilled about it for coming on 31 years. Last year for 30 years, my husband and I and all our kids made a big party to celebrate. I'm still completely sentimental about being Israeli. We've been married for almost 28 years. We have 6 kids. We speak Hebrew and English at home, not only English.
Wow.
What else would you like to know?
So I'd like to hear a little bit maybe about how you got into the field of marriage coaching.
Right. So the best way to learn anything is to prepare to teach it. And when we had been married around 8 years, before we were married, as is very traditional in many or even most Jewish communities, I took pre-marriage classes to learn about mikvah, about intimacy, about what a Jewish marriage and a Jewish home life is based on Jewish sources and all kinds of traditional wisdom. But after we'd been married about 8 years, it's different when the teaching meets real life and you have a certain amount of experience already in married life as a wife, and we already had a few children, thank God. And I didn't really have anybody to talk to about the questions that I said, is it supposed to be like this? It is okay. It's not okay. Is there something I should be doing differently? Am I allowed to feel like this? What happens when we disagree? All kinds of questions that I could tell you today are very normal, but in the Western world, we don't grow up in extended families, in chamulot, in clans of tribes of women. And so even if what you're thinking or feeling is totally normal, you don't have any way to know that it's normal because we were raised a lot on privacy. And the only place we really share information is in our small nuclear family. In my case, my mother was, first of all, in the United States. She was also already very disabled and suffering from dementia. It wasn't really like I could talk to her about these things. My mother-in-law, who just passed this past year, who I loved and admired and respected and was very close to, also wasn't living in Israel yet at the time. And I also don't know how much I would have been able to discuss it with her. Because even though we had a great relationship, still, it's his mom, it's not my mom. I don't know. Can I say anything about him? Mm-hmm. So the way for me to have a safe space in which I could ask questions and not have to worry about what will people think and will they judge me and will I be embarrassed and what does it say about me, was I signed up to become a college teacher. Right? I trained to teach pre-marriage classes, and then you can ask whatever you want under the disguise of say, well, no, I just want to know what I would say if somebody, we're asking for a friend, right?
What a
Hashtag asking for
clever
a
way. Yeah,
friend.
the general asking for a friend, but it's
Right.
actually me.
Totally. Hashtag asking for a friend. So that was the first step that I took towards training to help other people. And I absolutely was completely honest with myself that I was really doing this for me. But I also did end up teaching those classes for over 15 years, mostly to non-observant women. And it was both a way for me to give back to the community and also a way for me to constantly be exploring my own ideas about womanhood, about femininity in a Jewish context, also not in a Jewish context. Like, is there any way for me to explain what I feel is a traditional Jewish perspective to somebody who doesn't necessarily identify as traditionally Jewish or doesn't feel committed to traditionally Jewish? So to always be translating my ideas also into other languages, whether it's from English to Hebrew or from, from traditional to modern to all different kinds of dialects, so to speak, learning how to bridge the gap between what I have inside my head and how I can communicate it clearly to another person. That was my first step into coaching. And then further down the line, we already had a few more, when the kids were older and we had more kids, I had I don't want to say traumatic, that sounds extreme, but I had a very distressing experience when our third child was born at our pediatrician. And I said, look, there's more of them now than there are of us. And sometimes I have this problem, sometimes I have that problem. And our pediatrician, who I loved, who I think is a great woman and a fine doctor, looked me straight in the face and said, if you're not managing, maybe you shouldn't have any more.
Wow.
And I felt like I was smacked in the face. I was really shocked. I was not expecting it. And I did definitely want more children. But this is a great example of how what other people do is one thing and what we do with it is another thing. Because after I stopped reeling from the shock of what she said, I said, I'll show her. I will too manage. I will too learn how to, how to be a more competent mother. And we're going to have as many kids as we want. And, and that kind of drove me to say, well, how do I learn how to do this better? And to go to my first workshop as a mom and, and just bring up all those little things, which also I was very busy judging myself all the time and say, how come you're not better at this? And it's not such a big deal. And why are you having such a hard time? And okay, so that and this, like in the other class, was a place in which I could say whatever I was thinking without having to edit myself and without having to check myself and just say, look, he's 5 years old and all I want to do is get him out to Ghana in the morning without either one of us having a tantrum. Why does that never work? This is what happens. This is what happens next. This is what happens after that. Can you help me rewrite the script that we seem to be destined to play out over and over and over again? I want to be in a different movie. Can you help me? Like, you're the director, producer, choreographer. Can you help me write a new movie for our morning routine?
You know what? Sorry, I want to stop you there. And I just want to reflect back to you how incredible it is that you saw challenge as a way to learn and grow and manage better and get the skills that you needed, and that you looked outside of yourself for that. And I think so much of the time for us as women, we don't ask, we don't look for that support, and we are not meant to know all of this ourselves. We are not meant to, merely by the fact of being a wife or becoming a mother, automatically know how to be the best person in that situation and how to relate to the other people in our lives. How can we possibly know that, especially when sometimes there are those clashes and our personalities are not always so, perfectly aligned with our spouses and with our children and with other people in the world?
For sure. And another example of how you can never tell or how much freedom we have to decide how to respond to our circumstances. I met Elia on my own as a young adult, without my mother, without my father, without my sister. I didn't have any close relatives here. And some people, when they hear that, they say, wow, that must have been really hard. So first of all, hard is always subjective. It's really important to know that hard is not some scientific standard out there. I could make cookies and somebody say, wow, these are really good cookies. Is it hard? I never know how to answer that question. It might be hard for you. It wasn't hard for me. Like the fact that I didn't have people here who I could rely on to fill in the place that we often look to parents or elders is also part of what made me understand that if I want help, I'm going to have to look for it.
Right.
Right. If I had had family here, I don't know how that would have played out differently, but I want people to understand that your circumstances are just the beginning of the story. It's never the end of the story. Sometimes we do find ourselves in very adverse circumstances. Things did not always go smoothly for me. But at least some of the time, if you can look at that and go, I don't like this. I don't like how it's going. I don't like how it feels. And I want to do something about it. Right. If you find it inside yourself, great. I'll never tell a woman that you need coaching. I don't like these people who say everybody who's going to have kids should have to take a class. If you can figure it out yourself and it's working and you're happy and you have more or less the kind of life and relationships you want to have, more power to you. If it's working, keep it up. You're great. You don't need anybody else's permission. But if you find yourself struggling with something, if you're not thrilled with the way something goes, if, like we said, you look in the mirror and you're not thrilled with what you see, and you're not smiling at yourself in the mirror and high-fiving yourself in the mirror, then what can we do about that?
So I like the reference to the high five, because I'll just let the ladies on the call know the joke behind the scenes is that I think we both are big Mel Robbins fans, and she has this high five habit, which is very much about giving yourself that amazing feedback, like, wow, well done, you're doing great, even when you don't think you are, to even preempt it. So that's, yeah.
And the neuroscience of it is very simple. Your brain does not care if the person looking at you in the mirror is your own reflection or somebody else you love. All it registers is that somebody is smiling at you and encouraging you and high-fiving you. And that automatically really does help you to feel better.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Okay, so you became a color teacher. You then became a parent coach from all your dealing with your own children. And then when did marriage coach get added on to all of this?
So after I got coached as a mother, I said, wow, this stuff really works. I have to learn how to do this and, share the wealth. And that's when I trained as a parenting coach. I trained at Merkaz Shefer in Yerushalayim. So the framework there is, first we train to facilitate group workshops, which is like the foundation of the work. And then to do also individual one-on-one coaching with parents. And then the theoretical framework in the Shefer approach is also applicable to marriage situations and also to personal life coaching. So that's the track, and you don't have to carry on. But I think that people who train as coaches, once you get into it, it's like a bug. You just want to learn more and do more. And married moms is my absolute favorite thing, because I love being a woman. I can't believe that at the age of 55, I can actually say that. I'm sure I could not say that as a younger woman, but I do.
Wow.
I love being a woman, and I love being a wife and a mom. And I think that women are so powerful, and we spend so much of our life being frustrated with things which are actually very difficult about being women and about running families, especially in modern Western society. But we forget how much power and influence we really have. And if a married mom gets coached or gets therapy or whatever it is that she gets, and she can solve her problems, and she can be happier with herself, like herself more, trust herself more, have more compassion and patience with herself, the whole family benefits. It sends like huge waves of positivity out, and it just lifts the whole family up. So even if her husband never comes for coaching, even if her kids are not in therapy, the whole family can just benefit in the most dramatic ways when the woman who is the wife and the mother, and in a certain sense, the linchpin of the whole family organism, that's why I love working with married moms the most. And very often, of course, the marriage issues and the parenting issues tend to be the same issue inside inside the woman who is both the
Inside
wife
her.
and the mom.
Interesting.
They
So it's
work
so-
very closely together. So that's my favorite kind of coaching. I do other things too, but my favorite thing is working with married moms, but on their marriage relationship and their parenting at the same time. And then just like, wow, the whole family is swimming.
Amazing. So it's something interesting. And when you were discussing that now, it made me think of something that I speak to my clients often about, because they share with me also in consultations what they find challenging. You know, very often food that people, I think everyone can agree with this, you know, when we're not eating well and we don't feel good, or when something happens and we look to food as a way of comfort or reward or soother or number, you know, these kind of conversations come up often, and I often say to the clients, to the women clients that I'm dealing with, that it does sometimes feel like a heavy burden to be carrying, that if we aren't in the best frame of mind, that it affects the rest of our family. And it can feel a bit heavy sometimes, like that we really are carrying that load. But I certainly have seen it in my own family, in my own life. And I believe that it's a choice. I think that there's a way to go about it that you can still have the difficult feelings and allow for them to be expressed, but in a way that doesn't have that ripple effect in a negative way out into your family, because I think that just compounds then how poorly you feel on your inner world. Because when you don't feel good, and then, I mean, I'm sure we all as human beings unleash it. I think of my Friday afternoons after cooking and cleaning in the kitchen, you know, before Shabbat comes in, how, especially like after moving to Israel, that was like the most challenging time. I think everyone in my family went into Shabbat in the worst mood possible because I was in a bad mood. And, you know, I think first of all, being aware of how you're feeling on the inside and how you are expressing that out, and the feedback that you're getting from your family and your kids, you can then, with work, and I think we're going to get into this a little bit now, make a choice on how you are going to respond, on how you are going to choose to behave, which is going to be, how do I want to feel afterwards, and how do I want my family environment to be, and then choose in line with that. I laugh to myself sometimes, and I think you can appreciate this, and I hope everyone can appreciate this. But when I'm really getting angry, I do ask myself the question of whether it's worth me allowing this to build and boil over, or whether I need to just acknowledge it. I try and identify where it's coming from and let it go, so that it doesn't just continue to move forward and ripple effect. So I'd love you to speak a little bit more to this, because I think as a coach, obviously you have skills, you have tools of how you coach the married moms that you work with and you love working with, in order to be able to resolve these kind of situations. And I'd love to tie it up also with this feeling that especially the women in the group have here of, I don't feel like myself anymore, especially in midlife, whether it's because of hormones or whether it's because of life situations, looking in the mirror and going, who on earth is that staring back at me? I don't recognize her anymore. I don't like how I'm looking. My body's changed. I've got a few more wrinkles. I found another gray hair. My skin's broken out. There's so many things that I think can overwhelm us at this time of life. And I almost feel like our ability to do this inner work is a gift that we can give ourselves, because not only can it help us through this midlife period, but if we feel like we can love ourselves, accept ourselves, maybe like ourselves a little bit better than we think we could, it just changes how we go through life. So I've thrown a lot out there, and I know that you can give me all of the answers, and the women in my group all of the answers.
Start with some of the answers.
Okay, some of them. Okay.
The first thing to know is that we never solve problems in generalities. We solve specific problems. So if a woman comes to you and she says, I don't feel good, tell me what to eat, you might ask questions like, well, what kind of not good do you feel? Do you feel irritable? Do you feel tired? Do you feel frustrated? Do you feel sad? Like, there isn't just, I don't feel good, right? So, and each one of those specific feelings might be connected to a different hormonal issue, I don't know, or might be connected, there might be a different kind of nutrition that would help that specific thing. So first of all, not generalities, particularities. It's very helpful to be specific. And in fact, very often that's the first part of the work. People will say, nothing is right in my life. I don't like who I am. My husband this, my marriage this, my job that. First of all, okay, fine. As coaches, sometimes the first thing our clients need is just somebody to listen to them, just to vomit it all out there and be heard and be seen. And that's great. And if that's the first step, fine. That alone can also give them the relief. If a woman is struggling with a sense that nobody understands me and nobody cares, then just being able to just brain dump, just vent it all might be a really first good step. Really, actually, very similar to when a person has a very upset stomach and they vomit, they feel better. Sometimes you just need to get it out and then you can start feeling better. That's the first thing. That we have to be, first of all, we need to be heard and seen and acknowledged. Second, and then the second thing is we need to start getting specific, okay? Nobody, not a physician or a coach or a nutritionist, can just fix everything in generalities. You need to be specific about what you want to fix, and then you need to create a plan. It doesn't just happen like this either, right? I want to lose 10.
If it could.
You know what? I don't know if it would or it wouldn't. That's not the way the world works for anybody. So we're trying to learn how to live life on life's terms, to get out of our imaginations and actually into life the way it really is, right? If I come to you and I say, I want to lose 10 kilos. So one of the things we might want to talk about is, what is the healthy rate of weight loss given how tall I am and how much I weigh now and how hard I'm willing to work and whether or not I exercise and whether or not I sleep? Like, I need to understand what the work looks like so that I can decide if I'm committed to it. Should I be expecting this to take 2 weeks, 2 years, something in the middle? Like, how does that work? So getting specific is very important. What is it that I want to fix? What am I unhappy with? What do I imagine the solution looks like? Like, where is the happily ever after that I want to get to? And then to build a plan and for both the coach and the client to understand what the process is going to look like to fill in, right? You're down there in the pit and I'm up here putting the ladder down. Let's talk about how many rungs there are on this ladder until you feel that you're out and all that kind of thing. And then what do the steps of the work look like, right? So if we talk about doing inner work, what does doing inner work even look like in real life? So one of the most important things in inner work is becoming aware of what's actually going on with us. When I say to you, my husband did that thing again, or he didn't do that thing again, and I've asked him so many times, and I explained
he didn't stack the dishwasher properly, and surely he knows how to do it because I always tell him.
told him a million times, right? And obviously the way that I do it is the proper way. Let's talk about that.
Of course.
Right. Right and wrong ideas, the idea that I'm right, he's wrong, and that it's that simple is at the root of a lot of marriage issues. I really would prefer to call them problems if people are allergic to that word, but I have a problem, right? I have a problem with the fact that he doesn't know the dishwasher the way he's supposed to. What is he supposed to mean? The way I told him to do it. Just take a tiny diversion into marriage life, okay? Marriage partners are meant to be partners, like if Rashi on Bereshit talks about partners being panim el panim, face to face. We are equal in our value as human beings. If I say to him, I'm right, you're wrong, is that a partnership perspective, or is that kind of me shifting it to this, where I'm on Mount Olympus and I know how the world is supposed to work, and you are supposed to just take orders or follow instructions? Neither partner is happy in this situation because neither partner in this situation has a partnership. Okay. And the work is to shift back into a situation where we're looking at each other in the eyes, face to face, and we're discussing or sharing. And Charlene says, well, what if I am right and he is wrong? Right? So let's try to take an example, which is maybe, let's say he's smoking and I don't smoke. And I say, look, like, don't you love me? Don't you want to stick around long enough for us to have grandchildren and retire together? Like, smoking is going to take years off your life. The thing that's least likely to get him to want to quit smoking is you nagging him to quit smoking. Like, it doesn't matter if I'm right? The question here is not how can I be right? The question is, how can I get along with this person who is different than I am? And no matter who that person is, no matter how old they are, it doesn't matter if he's younger than me or older than me, or if we are from the same cultural bracket and we're not, just people are different. Men and women are certainly different. And so that the challenge is not how can I convince him that I'm right and he should listen to me. That's not the challenge. The challenge is, even let's just say I'm right and he's wrong. How do we still get along, right? Let's say that he doesn't want to listen. Let's say he wants to do a wrong thing. I'm not his mother. I'm not the police. Like, if what I want is for me to be his wife and he to be my husband, then I have to stay in the partnership perspective. Right. Any other position that I take is likely to drive us further apart and not bring us closer together. So you have to decide what you want. You want to be together, or you want to be right.
Again, so that's the choice. It's at the end of the day, what are you choosing here? Are you choosing your marriage, or are you choosing to be right? I think that's what I'm hearing you say. Yeah.
And back to what we were talking about earlier, very often when a woman chooses to be right, it's because there is something inside her that feels a little empty or a little scared or insecure or emotionally threatened. I'm not talking about situations of abuse, okay? Major disclaimer, we're talking about normal people and normal relationships, normal imperfect relationships. I might feel like, I don't know, I don't really like it when he says that or when he behaves that way. Nothing actually dangerous, but our emotions can feel threatened even when there's no, actual danger. Right. Which is why the relationship starts with you. Right? With me, with the person who's feeling, if I'm feeling I need to be right about this, really, why? Why do I need to be right? What is it that's that in me that can't tolerate somebody else having a different idea about the dishwasher? Why do I feel that that's costing me something personally, emotionally? Why do I feel that that somehow diminishes me in my position in the relationship? If I can answer those questions for me, then one of two things will probably happen. Either he won't need to prove anything about the dishwasher anymore, and he'll be more comfortable cooperating and doing the things I want, or I really won't care anymore. Right. And either way,
how do you go about doing that? How do you go about asking those questions, doing the work to move to a point where you're choosing the relationship instead of choosing to be right?
So the first thing is self-awareness. The first thing is to be able to say, oh, I think that I'm right and I think that he's wrong, but as long as we stay in that place, nothing is going to change between us. I'm going to keep saying you're wrong. He's going to keep not listening to me, because imagine what it feels like to be the person who's being judged and criticized all the time, right? When I feel judged and criticized, do I say, oh yeah, sure, I'd be glad to do it your way? No, I shut down, I withdraw, I retreat, I become defensive, right? Because I also feel threatened. Sometimes I might push back, right? Very often there's dynamic where the woman is very critical and the husband becomes like this passive aggressive thing. It doesn't just happen out of nowhere, right? And I'm not judging him or her. I'm not saying that he's right or she's wrong or any of that. Marriage relationships are a dynamic. There's a constant interplay of energy between the two of us, and we can either be turning that merry-go-round in a very negative spiral, or one of us, and it doesn't matter which, can be the one to stop and say, let's go in the other direction. Let's start creating positive energy. So first of all,
this extends past a marriage. Like, there may be people also who are watching who may not be married, or whose partner is no longer with them anymore. I think this relates to any kind of relationship that we're having. And perhaps, at this stage also, if you are a busy work-related woman, it can relate very much to the workplace situations where I think, our home life, we definitely do get triggered, but I think in our work environment, this is another place where this can really show up.
Yes. And so another thing that's very important is to be able to differentiate between responsibility and blame. If I say to a married woman or any other client, where are you in this picture? Tell me about how you feel. Tell me about how you want to respond differently. She says, well, I'm not sure I do want to respond differently. I want him to change the way he's behaving. I do enough around here. I do too much as it is. Why should there be any demand on me to change? It's just not fair. Things are already so unequal, and now there's something else for me to do. So first of all, you don't have to do anything you want to do. There is no demand. You don't have to do any work you don't want to do. You don't have to change anything you don't want to change. And it's not your fault. I'm not interested in whose fault it is. I'm not interested in placing blame. I'm not here to judge anybody. What I'm here to show you is that when there's a disagreement, there are two parties, right? It takes two to tango. You're not dancing alone, right? What where are you in this crazy devil's dance that you say you don't want to be in anymore? How can we help you to change your part? And as long as she keeps saying, and again, this could play out with a boss or a mother-in-law or a sibling or a neighbor, as long as you keep saying, no, it's not fair. I'm right. And I'm not, then what can I do?
Well, then there's nothing's going to change. So yeah, so I think, so I'd like to get to a little bit more about that inner work, the answering those questions. How can we move ourselves forward in order to be able to, the example I always like to give my clients is, sometimes we have the same dialogue, the same script that we tell ourselves over and over again in our head. It's our belief systems. It's what we believe needs to happen to be true. I explain it like a tennis match where if you keep hitting the ball back, it's the same as like the two to tango dance. If you keep hitting the ball back, it's going to keep coming back to you. Whereas if you put your racket down and you walk off the court, that ball's not going to come flying back at you. How can we make that shift from being able to put that racket down, to stop the dance, to identify perhaps what our inner dialogue is that's driving us to stay stuck in that cycle? Because again, I think it has a huge impact on how we feel in our inner world. And if we are able to change that narrative, to reframe for ourselves what perhaps our expectations are, so much can shift in our lives and will give us the ability to feel lighter and enjoy living this life that we're going to live anyway.
Right. So whether the challenge is not reaching for the crisps, or whether the challenge is not saying that thing that my husband does not want me to say to him anymore, or whether the challenge is not taking that cigarette or whatever it is, there's always going to be the impulse, right? And the response. And any change that I want to create involves sticking in more space in between the impulse and the response, right?
It's like time, that pause between the two.
Right. It's sticking a wedge in between those two things. And instead of having an automatic impulse reaction, we want to stick a wedge in there so that there's space. The more space there is, the more I can choose, the more I can have intentional responses, conscious responses. The more choice I really have about my responses. As long as it's all very automatic, I don't even feel like I have a choice, right? So the first thing is, how do we learn how to stop? How do we learn how to not respond immediately? How do we put that wedge in? And then what kind of positive content can we create in that space that will help me to make the better choices? So the most important thing is in learning how to stop is you have to really want it, right? A person has to be able to say, I understand that if I want to lose weight, I'm going to need to eat less or change what I eat, right? Choose different foods to eat or exercise more or some combination of the three. Maybe it also involves, designing a certain kind of meal plan to suit my hormones. Maybe there's also some kind of a medical treatment that I need or don't need. So the first thing is for a woman to say, I want to be healthy, or I want to achieve this weight loss goal, or I want to improve my marriage. I want to achieve that thing, and I'm willing to stop doing what gets in the way as the first step on the path to achieving my goal. I'm willing to give up my instinctual responses. I'm willing to put them on the shelf. I can always take them down again if I miss them and I want them. I'm willing to stop doing what doesn't work even before I learn what doesn't work. And that can be very challenging.
So what I like to encourage my clients to do, especially when they're trying something new like that, because it can feel quite overwhelming and the old habits are so ingrained, we don't even think about it. As you spoke about that automatic, trigger reaction, is I ask them, I call it the APRO approach, and I know that only the South Africans on this call will really understand what buying something on APRO means, which basically means that you're trying something out. You take something home from the shop, a dress, to see if it looks good with your shoes and your jewelry and your hair and your whatever. And if you like it, you buy it. And if you don't, you send it back. So with all these kind of new habits, I think it's so important to be able to really try them on for size and see if it works for you. See if, trying a different way, just a side caveat, I don't, especially for this group of women of over 40, eating less and exercising harder is not necessarily the answer to the weight problems that you're experiencing. And particularly when I work with this group of women, this trying something on for size is so important because we don't necessarily know if the advice that I'm going to give you in our first or second consultation is really going to be right for your body, because unless I send you off for a specific genetic test that tests what nutrition works best with your body, nobody in this world can give you the perfect answer to that. So we have to try things on for size. So I think no matter whether it's habits, whether it's something new that you're trying, you have to approach it in a more fluid, more flexible way and see whether it fits your life, whether it fits you, how you feel afterwards.
So I think there are two steps that involve that can help a person to stop doing something that isn't working, that even before you start figuring out what does work. One thing is substituting a different behavior. From now on, every time I feel the craving for the chips or the desire to just say all the angry things, I'm going to go hide in the bathroom. I'm going to take out a notebook and I'm going to write. I'm going to say, I don't want to be angry, so I'm leaving right now. I need to have a 10-minute run. I'll be back. Finding something that is immediately available to me that I can substitute for the thing that I want to not do, right? Drinking a glass of water, going to a different room, writing, any kind of exercise,
breathing
exercises, although those can be more challenging if somebody, those can be more challenging for somebody at the beginning of the journey.
Yes,
because it doesn't feel at the beginning like you're actually doing something. And sometimes when you have all this angry, nervous energy that you want to offload somehow, it can be easier at the beginning to do something that feels active.
Right.
Wash dishes, fold laundry, exercise, something that feels physical that can help you discharge some of that hyper, intense energy. So the first is have a go-to substitute. Whenever I feel that thing I don't want to do, have a substitute. When I feel that, I'm going to do this instead, right? And that's a wedge that comes in between the impulse and the response. After I get some practice with the substitute activity, then I think something a little bit calmer is really important to do. Breathing exercises is a great example. But my goal in the second stage is actually to be with the difficult feelings, not to escape them like in the first stage, which I think is maybe a necessary step for a lot of people to take at the beginning, just to find a healthy way to escape them until I settle down and then I can think about them. But as I keep practicing, I want to be able to go more directly to the situation where I can just be with myself without judging myself, without criticizing myself, without feeling ashamed, without criticizing myself, and just go, oh, that's interesting. Why do I feel that way? You know, what is that all about? Or even before I can think, just being able to go to a quiet corner and sit there and say, I feel so angry now. I could kill him. I can't believe it happened again. But it's not directed at him anymore. It's something that I'm working out with myself. And if I can practice just feeling my feelings, just acknowledging them, just letting them be, very often, if I don't interfere, feelings are like a wave. If you've been to the beach, right, the wave, you see it coming and you see it rising and rising and rising and gathering strength, and all of a sudden it crests and then it falls. And if we can not interfere, if we can sit and let the feelings pass through us and neither feed them nor fight with them, it can be very frightening if you're not used to it, to just sit there and let yourself feel
and allow it. Yes.
You know, rage, disappointment, anger, deep sadness, to just sit and feel that. That's not a simple thing for a lot of people to do, right? And you feel it in your body also. People have cramps in their stomach and pounding in their heads and shaking from anger. You know, it's a lot of things. And if you
very visceral response, I think those emotions definitely
very physical. And if you can just let it be, it will pass through you and it will go. And then you actually feel calm in your body and in your mind. And then if you want to, you can also explore and reflect. But I mean, you can't skip the first few steps, which might be like escaping it and then actually allowing myself to be with it and feel it. And then reflecting, exploring, maybe that's the time when I can start thinking about different ways to negotiate it next time. So that's, I think, a lot of those are most of the components of trying to become a different version of myself. Right. which I will like better and be happier to live with. And it's so important to say that I'm not doing this for anybody else. Even if it's in the context of my marriage, I'm not doing it for my husband. If it's in the context of myself as a mom, I'm not doing it for my kids. I'm doing it for me. This is my responsibility to myself.
Well, I think it's so much better, because how often do we have a trigger and a response, be it that we react in anger, or we end up going and eating what we promised ourselves we wouldn't have, and then having all of those after feelings of guilt and remorse and the judgment and the criticism that comes from it. So I think by doing what you've described, by creating that wedge, by pausing, by being able to take yourself out of the situation, then be able to reflect and allow those emotions, and first to allow the emotions and then to reflect on them, gives you the opportunity to remove a lot of that guilt, judgment, criticism that happens as a result of reacting too quickly to situations where, once we are calmer, we often say to ourselves, I wouldn't have done that if I was feeling like this right now. So I want to move on to a very big topic, and we've skirted around it a little bit, and I know that we did discuss it last week, is this: I look in the mirror and I don't recognize myself. How can, through perhaps some of the coaching tools that you have, how can my wonderful ladies in this group get to a greater sense of acceptance before they see real big changes? Because, you know, I'm working with a lot of them on how to make significant changes to nutrition and mindset in other ways, and stress the stress response, because stress response is a very big part of what happens to our body in midlife. The more stressed we are, the less capable we are of dealing with these emotions, the greater the symptoms that we experience. I see with a lot of women that when they are able to manage their stress better, things like their mood improves and anxiety improves and their sleep is better and their energy is better. So the stress of worrying about what I look like, not recognizing myself in the mirror, before all of the pieces that I work on with them can fall into place, because sometimes it can be a very slow process, how can you give guidance on the ability to have that little bit more self-acceptance and honoring that person staring back at you in the mirror? Because it's not that she has no value, she has huge value. How can we get to the sometimes hidden value that we are not appreciating, staring back at us?
Self-acceptance is the key to what you said. When I look at the person in the mirror and I say, who are you even? And what have you done with that other woman who I used to like? So first of all, maybe we're lying to ourselves, and we never really liked the earlier versions of ourselves either. We're just telling ourselves a story that isn't even true. Because women who have experienced self-love and self-trust and self-acceptance and compassion when they were younger are more likely to have it when they're older as well. So first of all, it may very well be that we never really had it.
That's interesting.
And now is the time to develop it. Beyond that, I think it's important to take how I feel when I look in the mirror as a jumping off point and say, first of all, acknowledge the fact that I don't like what I see. How does that feel? Again, get specific. Different women will answer that question with different words. Disappointed, disgusted, revolted, frightened. There's a wide range of emotions that the woman looking in the mirror may feel. So first of all, when I get that sense that I don't like what I see, what do I feel? Get curious about it, right? And be specific. Now, very often this is already challenging, right? All I want to do is get away from the mirror so I don't see it, so I don't feel it. I want to avoid the hard feelings. And I get that, right? I understand that. That's going to work for you until it doesn't anymore. And when it doesn't anymore and you really feel, I need to do something about this, okay, that's when you can start not just running away from it, but saying, maybe I'm going to look in the mirror an extra 10 seconds this time and really try to look in the eyes of that woman who's reflected to me and try to see what I see there and try to understand, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What story am I telling myself? Not about her, because her is me. What story am I telling myself about me, about what's happened to me? Am I afraid of now? Am I afraid of the future? Am I afraid of dying? Right? Am I afraid of feeling useless? There's a million things, right, that I could be worrying about. And being specific about what they are is the key to addressing them. And then how, let's say I know, right, how do I move forward? So first of all, all these things are connected. How I look, how I feel, how I eat, how I sleep, how I exercise, my intimate relationships with my husband, my kids, my parents, if they're still alive. It doesn't matter. It's like stick a pin anywhere in the circle and start there. Any positive step you take to take better care of yourself will have a positive impact on everything else. If your marriage improves, so will the way you eat, so will the way you exercise, so will the way you sleep. And if you start sleeping better, it doesn't matter, just start.
Right.
Start wherever you think you can start and start taking better care of yourself.
And it doesn't have to be perfect.
There isn't any perfect.
Yeah, so that's so important. It's not
Whatever
an all
you
or
do,
nothing. Like I'm starting and I can, absolutely.
Whatever you do is not going to be perfect, because people are not perfect ever. Forget it. If you think somebody else is perfect, because you have no idea what their life is really like. And definitely we need to learn to give ourselves credit for small steps, right?
Right.
Because, but again, that's another example of how we judge ourselves. We take a little step and they say, what do you think that little step is going to make a difference? It doesn't even count, does it? So this is where a mindfulness practice, a daily mindfulness practice or weekly, whatever, can really make a difference, because self-acceptance and letting go of judgment and criticism is not something that any of us learn to do, I think, very easily. It doesn't have to be intense. If you start 5 minutes a day, 3 minutes a day, 1 minute a day counts, where you practice imagine yourself in different situations, just saying, you know what, this is actually who I am right now in this moment. This is who I am. This is how I am. This is where I am. And this imperfect person I am in this imperfect life, I still matter just because I'm here. I'm alive. I have intrinsic worth as a human being. I'm not more than anybody else. I'm not less than anybody else. We are all in this together and we all matter. If you are inclined spiritually or religiously, God loves me. God cares about me. God gave right. I mean, many Jewish people wake up, we say, Modeh or Modah ani lefanecha, right? Thank you, God, for giving me the new day of life, right? If God has seen fit to have me here today, then apparently that's a good thing.
I'm worth something. Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And trying to engage with myself and my existence here in a way where I'm not always measuring and I'm not always judging, and I'm practicing just accepting who I am, what I am, where I am, how I am. And people say, well, you know, then what will give me energy to change? Give it a chance. Okay.
Right.
People don't usually actually change because they've made themselves miserable. It actually works much better if you learn to make yourself happy.
Right.
So if people are afraid that, you know, practicing mindfulness or any kind of what seems like a passive practice, although it's anything but, is going to make them lose their edge or become like weak, it doesn't.
So that's very interesting that you mentioned that word weak, because I think, and this came up in my one group program where somebody turned around and said, but if I'm so forgiving of myself and I'm so compassionate with myself, then that means that I'm going to give in too much to things that I don't want to be giving into. And it was, I found it's a very important question to be able to say, not at all. That compassion and that forgiveness is incredibly important, because we spend so much of our time in judgment and criticism and guilt and being hard on ourselves, and so little of our time being able to be more mature and accepting. And I think with that maturity in our relationship with ourselves comes the compassion and the forgiveness from a place of strength.
What we don't want to be is, we don't want to be like teenage girls who are incredibly insecure and who are putting insane amounts of energy into their bodies and their appearances, but in order to gain acceptance from the outside.
Right.
We don't want to be that. Okay. We want to be grown women. I don't mean just older in our bodies. I mean like grown on the inside, like adults, like grown-ups. In modern Western culture, these are like not positive words, but right, actually in the Jewish tradition, elders are the containers of wisdom and are revered and are looked up to and are admired. Right. So we want to like become our own elders, and we want to be people who approach change from the inside,
Right.
not in order to get something from the outside. And in order to do that, being miserable doesn't work. And actually, the more confident I am, the more strength and resolve I have to meet the difficult emotions, to engage in difficult situations and get through them and move closer to living the life that I want to have and achieving the goals that I want to achieve. I can say both from reading the research, which anybody who wants to can find out there on Google, but also from very personal experience, that practicing self-compassion, practicing understanding what is mine and what is not mine, accepting my shortcomings, which, doesn't mean we're coming up on Elul, right? Accepting my shortcomings doesn't mean that I won't do tshuva. It doesn't mean that I won't ask for forgiveness from people if I need to ask it. It means actually that I'll be more brave in order to do those things. It's not about weakness at all, but it is about working from the inside and not in order to achieve things from the outside. And I can promise people, based on my own very personal experience, it doesn't make you weaker, it makes you stronger.
Right.
And practicing those things have definitely helped me to achieve my relationship goals, my weight loss goals, my fitness goals, and all kinds of other important things. And of course, goals are a moving target. Once you achieve some, you have new ones.
You're already on to the next one. Absolutely. I think one thing I want to add to that, which is really interesting, is that also that ability to have that self-acceptance with yourself in the mirror also starts with the ability us to acknowledge our worth and that we are worthy and valuable of taking care of ourselves. Because so often when we have this negative relationship with ourselves, especially when it's based on our outer appearance, that we either are too punitive in the way that we behave with ourselves, or too, I can't think of the word now. So like the way that this plays out with ladies who come to me asking me to help them heal this relationship with food in their body is that either they're being really, really strict and they're trying to eat as little as possible, or they can't maintain it, obviously, because no human being can. And then they find themselves face planting in the fridge or in the pantry because it's just too much to handle. And then that also drives this negative dialogue and this inability to accept it themselves, is because of this constant battle that they seem to be fighting on the inside. And one of the steps that I take with them is about, first of all, finding value in the fact that nourishing themselves is not only about food, and we discussed like the thought with it as well. But so interesting is that some foods in particular, and there's a lot of research on this, and I work extensively with it, is on how the food that we eat affects our thoughts and our emotions as well. So that gut-brain connection. So, sometimes when we want to choose to eat something, I also ask my clients, how do you want to feel afterwards? Do you want to be in a better mood? Do you want to feel less bloated? For me, in particular, there's certain foods that I have to avoid, otherwise I get joint pain. If I have joint pain, I'm going to feel irritable, and then I'm going to look at everyone around me and fight with them, and I'm going to fight with myself. So often, as much as that inner work is also about how we're speaking to ourselves, those mindfulness practices, it also has to do with how we're nourishing our bodies without this overarching deprivation. And I always say to my clients as well, and I don't actually like to use the word healthy, I like to use the word nourishing here, because what is nourishing for you may not be for somebody else. If we go according to the list of healthy and not healthy, I had a client yesterday come to me, and if she eats salad, she's in absolute agony. And every time she's ever tried to go on a plan to try and reduce her weight, of course, everyone tells her to eat salad, but she ends up in the toilet. So it's so important that you find whether it's the right mindfulness practices, whether it's the right nutrition that you need, the combination of those together, that you can look and recognize the value in who you are and be able to come at it from a much more nourishing perspective as well. So I think that's really, for me, which is very important, this overarching holistic approach that really works so well, because it's never any of these pieces in isolation. It's everything working in conjunction in order to be able to eventually turn around and go, wow, I'm so proud of what I've achieved. Whether it's I've managed to deal with my anger better, or deal with my anxiety better, or deal with my food obsessions better. All of that is at play here.
And I want to, first of all, point out the important thing which is when I say, well, what would nourish me right now? I want also to strive as much as possible to answer the question, how can I nourish myself? Right. It shouldn't be an answer that's dependent on somebody else, right? Well, I can't nourish myself because he, she, it, they. No. I take responsibility for nourishing myself emotionally, physically, through food, exercise, sleep, self-awareness, everything. Now, does that mean that, people could say, well, like, then what am I married for? Like, what is he even here for, right? If I'm responsible for me, then like, where's the relationship? So instead of saying it's your fault that or I'm unhappy because you, or any of those formulations, it's fine to say, I'm feeling so tired and so sad. And so, do you know what? Would you like to do something to help me feel better? I would love it if you would make me an omelet. I would love it if you would give me a hug. I would love it if we could have coffee tomorrow morning together. In other words, I'm taking responsibility for figuring out what will nourish me. And instead of saying you have to, I'm saying I invite you to.
Right.
Right. But it's open, right? And it has, would you like to? It would make me happy if you would. And then he's allowed to say yes, and he's allowed to say no. Right?
Right.
So that's the first thing, is that when we talk about how can I nourish myself, I'm taking responsibility for me. I'm not hot potatoing the responsibility onto any other person in my life. I love nourishing as that's a whole framework right there, right? How can I nourish myself? Because it could be physical and spiritual and emotional and all the things
Right.
together. And I do want to just bring it home for a moment to the menopause experience, because very often we feel that our previous selves have been cruelly ripped away from us. Like, nobody signs up for this program. Nobody says, oh yeah, sure, take all my estrogen, please. I wasn't using it anyway. No, nobody says that. It's, you wake up one day and it's gone or dropping quickly.
Or cycling and making you feel crazy from the roller coaster.
Right. And it's never coming back. And how are you supposed to feel about that? Like, it's not fair. Right. So here also, acceptance can be a very important tool. You say, look, this is actually built in to all women. It's not like somebody's out to get me personally. Yes, it is my difficulty right now in my body. I'm having the joint pain, the hot flashes, the sweats, whatever it is. And I would like to find ways to manage those better so I don't have to suffer from them. But first of all, acceptance of the sister and saying, look, I don't need to be angry about this. I don't need to feel a victim of my circumstances, which is very often how we feel, because if it's done to us and we didn't choose it, then it can feel we've been imposed upon, and can like lose all sense of agency or control in those situations. It really does help to remind ourselves that this is built into the program. If women in previous generations didn't experience menopause, it's because they died young, and we don't want to go there, right? This is not just us. All women were like more than 50% of the population, okay? Like, this is not weird or abnormal. This happens to all women. And the more we normalize it, the less scary it will be for all of us. And then also to say, I cannot change the natural process of menopause, but I can change how I feel about it. I can change how I manage it. I can change how I experience it.
And get the support that you need in order to go through that process the best way that you possibly can.
And there is so much that we can do, that if we focus on what we can do and we don't waste a lot of our energy railing against the dying of the light, then we really are going to suffer less. And the fact is that not all women suffer the same way through menopause. And I think it has a lot to do with how different women choose to engage in that stage of life.
I agree. It's so interesting. I can't remember where I read this, but the quote was that suffering in life comes from resisting that which is your reality. You get, suffering is more like, God forbid, they're big things that people are dealing with out there. But when we are not accepting of certain things and we resist going for help, that also can drive our frustration with it.
Well, first of all, suffering and grief are not the same. Okay. God forbid somebody dies. Okay. We don't say we'll just accept it. there's a stage at which grieving is an appropriate, healthy, normal, useful, moral, human thing to do. We don't have issues with grief, and grief is a part of many, many, many transitions. Grief is probably also part of the experience of menopause for many women, right? Where might be acknowledging and honoring and also grieving earlier stages of ourselves, right? Of our fertility, of our physical appearance,
Energy, sleep,
of
everything.
many,
Yes.
many things which are irrevocably changed. And that can be a healthy part of the process, right? It's a question of how deeply we go into it,
Right.
whether or not the grief morphs into depression or suffering or anxiety. Those are not all the same. Okay. And I do basically feel that most people, at least in the world that we live in, people with first world problems, that suffering is mostly optional. Grief will be a part of our lives no matter what. Grief, bereavement, suffering, we mostly do it to ourselves.
Interesting. So I think grieving is also something that comes with any change.
Yes,
Like
absolutely.
Charlene's saying, like the end of the era, an end of an era, because it's what we know. And when we move on to something that is unexpected, uncertain, then that can feel like this, first of all, grieving of what we've lost and what we've known. And in the beginning stages can feel like a suffering until we acknowledge that actually this is really normal. This is the next stage of my life, and I'm choosing to embrace it in a way, whether it's through getting support, whether it's through whether it's in a group situation, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's being able to speak with people that you trust in that space, because just speaking to anyone about it may actually not be very beneficial for you. It may actually do more harm than good. And sometimes also looking for advice out there, which is not as specific to you, can also not always be the best way to go. So, wow, I could speak for hours with you, Malka.
For sure. But please don't get your nutritional information or your medical information from Facebook. It can be a great place to connect with other women, but if you really want customized, practical, sound advice for you, whether it's nutritional or spiritual or emotional, find the professional or even just the trusted older person in your community who understands you and the context of your life and your goals, and work with them. Charlene asked a really nice question, which I think she meant to be helpful, but I kind of want to edit it. And she said, well, the next stage of our lives, the next year can be better, freer, joyous. It's true. There are definitely a lot of advantages that many women who are 40 plus or 50 plus or even 60 plus say, yeah, you know what? I worry a lot less about what other people think. I can dress how I want. I can live how I want. But I want to say something a little bit different, which is I want to encourage women not to judge it, right? It doesn't have to be better than what came before. First of all, it is what it is. None of us are going back. Where I am now is the most important thing, and also where I want to go.
Right.
But I don't need to say it'll be better than this. It'll be as much as possible to avoid, right? As much as possible, right? To avoid judgment, because with judgment comes buried under the judgment is a lack of satisfaction or security with the way things are. And I think the more safe we can feel with things actually as they are right now, the less pressure we'll feel both about the past and about the future.
Right. So we don't want to be looking in the rearview mirror anymore. We want to be looking out the front windscreen. We want to be conscious of where we are right now, what we can do right now in this moment to feel the best within our bodies, within our lives. And I think, Malka, you've given such incredible context to a very, very big topic tonight. And I really could continue to speak for hours and hours on end. And I thank you so much for giving of your time. I'm going to, share your details with the ladies in the group. So if anyone wants to chat with you further, if there are any questions that anybody has, in the group. I'll pass them on as well. You can get hold of me on my email for those of you who have it. I'll type it also in my Facebook group as well. Malka, is there anything in particular that you want to just say in closing that you feel is the most important message to leave the ladies with tonight?
You are never alone.
Amazing.
If you are so inclined, you can always speak to God. And if you're not, or if that's not working for you, there are so many other women around you, both friends or professionals, who can listen and who can also help you get where you want to go. Right. And don't need to do this all on your own.
Absolutely. Amazing. Thank you, Malka. I really appreciate your time so much. And thank you to everyone who stayed on this call. It's not often that everyone who joins the call stays on until the end. So there was so much value that you had to offer. And this will be available on recording. I will send out the link tomorrow as soon as it's all processed. It will be available in the Facebook group. For those of you who missed it, you can just watch it again. And an email will be going out to you tonight with a great discount on one of my amazing masterclass bundles for you, which is all about managing stress better, because I really want you to all be able to get through this period of midlife in the most you see brain fog in midlife. I need to go and do some of those stress exercises in the most well-being way possible. That was terrible English, but I'm going to leave you with that tonight. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.